Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you very much for being here. Well, first of all, I've got to welcome my team, the One Nation team in Parliament, my colleagues, my cohorts, whatever. They're on this journey with me, so thank you very much for being here. Also, I'd like to welcome you, the ladies and gentlemen who've come here today to be part of this and listen to my address. Well, I am aware that I am at the National Press Club, but I am delighted that I can speak to the people of Australia, and they are the people to whom I am accountable. Just to get things out of the way too, I think it's important, is Channel 9 here? I just want to clarify that no, Gina's jet is not broken, and I didn't come cattle class, or I did come cattle class actually. So anyway, just if you're dwelling on that, what question you're going to ask me, I just want to get that out of the way. Well, also, I will say, don't expect a divisive welcome to country from me. This beautiful country belongs to all Australians born here and those who have come to join us. I would like to acknowledge the men and women that have sacrificed their lives for our democracy, our freedom, for our country, and also to those migrants, those people that have worked extremely hard, and those Australians born here with their blood, sweat and tears to build this nation into the beautiful country that it is today. For the record, my job may surprise you. I am elected to represent the concerns of the people of Queensland. I am also the leader of a political party, One Nation. So I have a responsibility to the wider Australian electorate. My overriding concern, and that of the people I talk to, is that politicians today are good at talking but not listening. They will do anything to get your vote, but when that has been achieved, the voter is ignored. The public are sick and tired of being ignored. So what has happened in recent times when I have listened? Well, I'll tell you what the issues are. Firstly, immigration and housing. According to the Housing Industry Association earlier this month, housing demand in Australia substantially outstrips housing supply. The HIA says the underlying problem we have is trying to fit 11 million households into 10 million homes. Unsustainable demand has been driven by several factors, but the biggest is high immigration. Let's give these numbers some perspective. In August 2000, the Australian Bureau of Statistics reported Australia's population as a whole is projected to grow from the current size of 19 million to between 24 and 28 million over the next 50 years. It's only 2026 and we have already passed 28 million. At the time, the ABS did not consider net overseas migration exceeding 110,000 per year. At the time, it was pretty much unthinkable. Fast forward to today. Net overseas migration in the first 3 years under this Albanese Labor government has totalled 1.27 million people. Let me repeat that, 1.27 million people under this current government. That's more than 423,000 per year. A total of more than 1.9 million people arrived in Australia from mid-2022 to mid-2025. Undeniably, immigration or immigration policy has our country in the state of crisis. At the centre of this crisis is the utterly flawed policy of multiculturalism. We cannot be a multicultural society. We are a multiracial society, but we must be monocultural. Australians must live under the one cultural umbrella. Now to the facts. As one of your own, Paul Kelly, reminded us recently, some of our best universities have nearly 50% of their enrolments being overseas students. Is that what the electorate wants or supports? 32% of our population, 8.8 million people, have been born overseas. Is that what Australia supports? In the 2021 census, more than half of Australian residents, 51.5%, were born overseas or had one parent born overseas. 51.5%. Is that what's supported by the Australian electorate? Is that what Australia wants? The comparable figure for the United States is 14%. Do Australians feel that the nation is losing its identity along with its values? We all know the answer to that. Let me amplify this issue of national identity and Australian values. Only a fool would ignore the growing language problem, which is a function of immigration. Again, the 2021 census showed that 1 in 4 people, 23%, speak a language other than English at home, the most common being Mandarin and Arabic. How can you generate social cohesion if people can't speak the language? In that same census, 872,000 people self-reported as speaking English not well or not at all. Under the failed policy of multiculturalism, all cultures are allowed equivalents to ours. Surely opposing that is not racist, it's common sense. My party is rightly called One Nation. It is clear what we stand for. One nation, under one flag, and proudly Australian. We oppose entirely people coming into this country and bringing with them the troubles they have left behind. Coming to this country and ignoring our values, our language, our traditions, our dress, and the fact that we are predominantly a Judeo-Christian society. It's time we woke up. Western civilisation and its values are under siege. The people to whom I speak are fed up with hate preachers in some Sydney mosques. If they hate this country, they should be told to leave. Ed Hussein, the writer, has written a book simply called The Islamist. In it, he explains why he joined radical Islam in Britain, what he saw inside, and why he left. The writer was from a loving family who taught him that Islam is a religion no different from being a Catholic or a Protestant. But he soon was taught that Islam is not a religion, but a political movement. And he learnt that, quote, Islamist groups pose a threat to this country that we, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, do not yet understand, unquote. He says, quote, I illustrate the depth of the problem that now grips Muslim hearts and minds, and I lay bare what politicians and Muslim community leaders do not want you to know, unquote. What do we do here? We turn a blind eye. Why? Because we are frightened. Well, I am not frightened, and nor is One Nation. There is no room for hate preachers in this country. If they have arrived here, they will be deported. If they were born here, they will face the full force of the law. While ever I lead the party, I will not walk away from my commitment to get rid of social cancer. But Labor has allowed this immigration catastrophe to happen in the middle of a national housing crisis. So there is a housing crisis, but the not-so-smart thinkers in the Albanese government make changes to negative gearing. If you make a change to negative gearing, investment will move away from housing. That is common sense, but common sense is not common. And what will this do to the rental market? We haven't been able to house everyone already yet Labor has been bringing more than 1,375 people per day for the past 3 years. Just 2 months ago, SQM research showed the national rental vacancy rate was just 1%. It was just 0.5% in Perth, 0.7% in Adelaide, and 0.8% in Brisbane. It was only 0.4% in Hobart and Darwin. In the same month, the median weekly rent across Australia, capital cities, reached $680. That's a $35,000 a year after tax. How many Australians can really afford that? According to the Productivity Commission, in January this year, there were more than 250,000 applicants waiting for social housing in a country that's supposed to be as rich as us. 43% of lower income renters were experiencing rental stress. Up to 3.2 million people in Australia were at risk of losing their home. Disgraceful. And we know that around 130,000 Australians are sleeping rough every night. Even the Treasury's own forecast shows housing demand will exceed supply for at least the next 5 years. 2 years ago, I tried to secure a national plebiscite on immigration numbers. As usual, most of the Senate dismissed the notion of giving Australians a direct say on policy and voted it down. During the debate, I distinctly remember Coalition Senator Paul Scar saying, well, the issue was too complex to put to the Australian people. That disgusting comment says all you need to know about the political establishment's contempt for the Australian people, contempt for their intelligence, and contempt for the very concept of actually listening to them. I'm always listening, and that's why my policy to slash immigration reflects what most Australians want. The press might consider reflecting on this and better consider why more Australians trust One Nation on immigration policy than anyone else. The story is simple. My views haven't changed. Other political parties are simply following me. It's why my policy will restrict immigration from places immersed in extremism like radical Islam, because that's what most Australians want, especially after Bondi and the return of ISIS bride terrorists. Make no mistake here. One Nation is dedicated to fighting against radical Islam, and the obvious threat it represents to the peace of our country and the safety of our community. I will not hesitate to call it out for being incompatible with Australian values and our way of life, for its hatred and its love of deadly violence. If we want a secure and peaceful world, radical Islam must be destroyed. There is no place for it in Australia, and my party and I won't tolerate it. Now let's talk about the cost of living. The Salvation Army's latest Red Shield report released in May this year is not easy to read. It reveals the plight of increasing numbers of low-income Australians who now need help just to get by. Thousands of Australians are seeking this help every day. Organisations like the Salvos are so overwhelmed with demand, they're having to turn people away. Of the 4,400 people surveyed, 19% said they'd eaten food from a rubbish bin in the past 12 months. expired or spoiled food. 91% said they had skipped meals and 32% said they do so on a daily basis. 35% said they survived on only one meal a day. 35% said they survived on only one meal a day. And 67% said they watered down food and drinks to make them last longer. 35% of parents said their children had gone to school hungry.
Continue, please, Senator.
Thank you very much.
We're not doing stunts, all right? Go to the President.
I think this is very important what I've just said, and I want you, the people here, and the people watching this. 35% of parents said their children had gone to school hungry. How can we hold our heads up? How can we, as members of Parliament, who are supposed to represent the people of this nation, allow that to happen? It is disgraceful. And yet this Albanese Labor government cannot help our own people here, but keeps bringing in more into the country and floods this country time and time and time again. 59% said their children had missed school because they couldn't afford the transport costs. 84% said they went to bed early to keep warm. Again, where's Peanut Bowen? Where is he with his reliable energy? What is that doing for our age, for our pensioners, those people that can't afford to pay their electricity costs? 63% said they used candles and torches for lighting their homes. What has that done with a lot of homes to go up in flames? People have lost their homes because they're trying to save a few dollars in electricity that they can't afford. 49% said they go to public places like shopping centres to keep warm or cool. 51% can't afford a doctor, dentist or optometrist. 51%. And 46% can't afford prescription medicine. This is unacceptable, highly unacceptable to me and my colleagues and my party. As I will explain later, the government's energy policy, which One Nation will dismantle, feeds problems such as these. Everything is unbearably dearer. OzHarvest's annual Frontline report this year showed about 350,000 Australians were seeking food relief each month. More than 2/3 of them are families. Charities report having to turn away 74,000 people each month, and every charity reports increasing demand. About 36% of people seeking relief are doing so for the first time. Almost 1/3 of households needing relief had at least one employed person. What kind of Australia have we become? These figures are appalling and totally un-Australian for a rich country such as ours. Put bluntly, these figures derive because of one policy above all others, the hoax of global warming, which is now climate change. It has produced an increase in energy costs, which has taken Australia into energy poverty. The Albanese government itself is proof of what I am saying. Remember, when first campaigning to be elected, the Albanese government said it would reduce power bills by $275. Surely the slogan, "Fire the liar," has relevance to millions of Australians. Was it a lie to campaign in 2022 on the slogan, "A better future"? Is this how Australians feel today? The cost of energy feeds into everything we use. We eat, we manufacture, everything. So food is dearer, housing is dearer, rents are dearer. There is your cost of living crisis. Albanese lied to become elected, and Australians are paying for it. How many times were you, the media, condemned for simply asking before the last election whether a Labor government would make changes to capital gains tax and negative gearing? Didn't they lie to the electorate? I'm meant to be a voice for that electorate. The public are sick to the back teeth with these lies. When the Prime Minister was delivering a speech to miners in the coal mining region of New South Wales, the Hunter Valley, in the 2025 election campaign, did he fall off the stage and deny it? Let me be blunt. If you lie once, why won't you lie again and again and again? Let me come back to energy, the central source of national poverty. Amos Hochstein was the Special Coordinator for Energy Security during the Biden administration. Recently, he said of renewables, quote, "Renewables don't compete with oil. They don't supply solutions to aviation. We rely on more shipping that doesn't run on renewables. Yes, we should invest more in renewables, but they won't solve this crisis anytime soon. The inside of an electric vehicle is still made of plastic that is made from fuel and petroleum. Our hospitals are made entirely from petroleum. Our masks, our syringes, MRI machines, CT scans all need helium, which comes from natural gas." End quote. Because individuals and businesses are suffering from this net zero nonsense, the government shovels out millions of dollars of taxpayers' money just to justify their failing energy policy. Let me make no apology. One Nation will end this renewable energy bribery, grants, tax incentives, concessional finance, even the government underwriting anything that sponsors the whole net zero hoax. Let me give you one example of many. Rewiring the nation to build useless transmission lines and destroy prime agricultural land, billions of taxpayers' dollars. This will end. One Nation will always protect prime agricultural land. It belongs to farmers, not government transmission lines. Let me give you another example. The bloke in the corner store is productive. Does he get subsidies? I speak to struggling farmers everywhere. Do they get subsidies? Does the young 25-year-old going out on his own, starting up a business, does he get subsidies? But no. Community batteries, solar banks, regional renewable projects, it's impossible to keep track of all these taxpayer subsidies. The government's Clean Energy Finance Corporation provides tens of billions of dollars for renewable projects, of course at favourable rates. This is a rort. Renewable energy projects benefit from cheaper finance than the market would offer. Are those benefits available to the bloke in the corner store? The small businessman in the suburbs? The businesses that keep regional towns in Australia alive? Do they get financed at favourable rates? But this outfit, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, has received over $200 billion of taxpayers' monies. That is $200,000 million of taxpayer money. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to renewable energy. But if it's the saviour of the energy crisis and if it's profitable, why would government have to prop it up? One Nation is saying, put everything into the energy mix. Let everyone share the wealth that is under our feet. We are one of the richest resource nations in the world. I am saying get ideology out of the way. Let me just add that it's clear that the hydrogen energy solution is blowing up in Australia's face, or should I say, Andrew Forrest's face. But we still have here we go again, taxpayer subsidies, a hydrogen Head Start program, $4 billion in 4 budgets, and the Prime Minister has announced $520 million of your money for green hydrogen projects outside the Head Start program? And what about Malcolm Turnbull's $2 billion Snowy 2.0 project? He calls himself a businessman, but showed no regard for taxpayers' money. The $2 billion is now forecast to reach over $40 billion. Cancel it. Cut our losses. Governments have no money of their own other than what they take from taxpayers. The Snowy Hydro 2.0 is nothing more than a black hole of debt for taxpayers. Before the South Australian election, One Nation argued, quote, Australia's fuel shock exposes energy insecurity. Australia's energy sector is finally catching up to what One Nation has been saying for years. We need a secure, reliable energy future. Every leap forward in human progress has come from mastering energy, from fire to steam, from coal to oil. Each step has powered stronger economies, lifted people out of poverty, and secured our future. Energy isn't a luxury. It is the backbone of prosperity. Get it wrong and everything else suffers. Get it right and the nation thrives. End quote. Therefore, moving forward, One Nation will introduce nuclear energy. Let me be plain and clear. Our energy crisis is a product of failed energy policy, and this policy was supported years ago by major political parties and the big media giants. I have always opposed it. Ford and Holden closed their factories more than a decade ago for one simple reason: the cost of production. The source of much of our wealth is under our feet and should not be only for export. Of course, basic environmental standards must be met, but they can't be allowed to throttle our economy. We will never be able to do without coal and gas. We should encourage the investment in them and provide power to homes and businesses, as we once did, as the world's cheapest price. Bowen said last March that households stood to claim savings of up to 10.1%, yet average electricity debt for customers on hardship programs has jumped 22.8% over the past year. These are Australian Energy Regulator figures. Gas hardship debt is up 22.2%. This applies to households, small businesses, industry and manufacturing. The regulator, not Pauline Hanson, warned, quote, experiencing energy debt and the ability of customers experiencing financial difficulty to repay debt remain a concern, end of quote. Stop blaming the Middle East. Electricity prices increased across all regions before the war in the Middle East, and there is evidence that disconnections over the coming quarters will increase if conditions don't improve. Disconnections in the first quarter of this year saw more than 6,200 electricity customers cut off. Average debt at the point of disconnection was more than $2,600. I should point out that there are now new rules to take effect from July that will prevent disconnections for debts below $500. We have just had a budget brought down, and I will not hesitate from continuing to say, especially to young Australians, that the government is not telling the truth. The Prime Minister and the Treasurer are desperate, and they keep saying that anyone who opposes the budget measures is opposing the opportunity for young people to get into housing. I am loath to call this another lie, but how else do you describe it? More than 40,000 18 to 20-year-olds will lose out to Chalmers capital gains tax. In the last 10 years, the numbers of young people making income out of assets in an entrepreneurial way, buying an apartment, doing it up, selling it, there has been a 365% increase in the number of 18 to 24-year-olds who have done this. A 351% increase in 25 to 29-year-olds, a 246% increase among 30 to 34-year-olds. So the largest capital gains cohort is younger. There are now over 215,000 under 35-year-olds who will see less income from their investments. Punishing ambitious and aspirational young people who are trying to build a future, to build wealth, to build independence, and to invest in Australia, Albanese and Chalmers are heading in the wrong direction. Chalmers argues when it comes to people under 35 with shares, quote, about 1 in 10 under 35 have shares, unquote. What a pathetic defence is that. 1 in 10 is a lot of people. Before COVID, in 2021-22, nearly 75,000 Australians 18 to 24 years of age recorded capital gains. Now the Albanese government is coming after these young Australians. They call it tax reform. How on earth can ripping another $77 billion out of the pockets of Australians be called tax reform? You see, the truth is, on April 21, 2006, Peter Costello declared the nation debt-free. I have never been in government. We have done our best in the Senate to curtail the irresponsibility of previous governments and this government. I have always argued against escalating debt. The difference between Albanese, Chalmers and me is that I actually ran a small business. They have earned their income by working for government, taking their salary from the taxpayer. In the 20 years since Peter Costello made that declaration, in that time the debt has climbed from zero to almost $1 trillion. That is, on average, $50,000 million a year, every year for 20 years. Dr. Chalmers has a PhD from ANU writing about the Keating government. Well, he hasn't learnt much. Paul Keating reduced spending to 22.9% of GDP. Chalmers has managed to increase that to about 28% of GDP. Gough Whitlam was sacked for bad economic management when spending reached over 25% of GDP. Albanese and Chalmers should be sent in the same direction. Our task is simple. We must grow the national cake. If the cake stays the same size and the population increases, there is less for every one of us. Debt doesn't seem to matter to this government or its predecessors. In 2013, our debt was $257 billion. 257,000 million. Get your head around that. On the latest figures, we're heading towards $1 trillion. This government keeps spending. Spending leads to inflation, and inflation leads to interest rates going up. The IMF have warned that spending is breeding inflation. The Reserve Bank has warned that as inflation climbs, so must interest rates. Therefore, regardless of whether you've got 500,000 homes available tomorrow, try borrowing on a single income. But under this government, interest rates are heading towards 10%. Young people can't afford the deposit, let alone the mortgage repayments. Young people are the latest victims of the government's lies. Let me just say what concerned voters know. Every attempt has been made for years to silence me. In fact, there are always some people, usually a lot of people, who get offended by what I say or do, even offended by my very existence. I don't fear them, I embrace them. But many people aren't like me. In Australia today, in our democracy, the real tragedy is people are frightened of what will happen to them if they just speak up. But now they are finding the courage to embrace one nation. But what a national tragedy, indeed a disgrace, that many people feel afraid to make their views heard. As a result, civil debate is paralysed, and the media are complicit in amplifying this fear. Many people feel that they can't indulge that essential Australian characteristic of speaking out and speaking up, because the risk of speaking out is simply too great. They feel demonised and condescended, and they're mad as hell about it. It's as good an explanation as any for the earthquake that is changing the political landscape in Australia and other countries. That was the best outcome of the Voice to Parliament referendum. It showed that Australians were not prepared to let their country be taken away from them. This won't happen if One Nation is given a say in government. If I sound defiant, yes, I am. Am I committed? You bet I am. In many respects, I haven't changed, and neither has One Nation. Thankfully, Australians have woken up, for which I am grateful. After years of hoping for something different from the political class, but getting nowhere, many Australians are looking elsewhere. I am a known quantity for these Australians. They know I'm not part of the political establishment that is no longer listening to them and no longer seems to care. They know you've come after me, even happy to see me put in prison. They know what you've been saying about me, and many of them no longer believe you. They've watched your first to miss One Nation's rise as a blip. As the polls progressed, they watched you confidently say it will fall apart. Then they watched as you started saying it was a concern, but only for the coalition. Later you said it was a worry, and then they watched as you actively tried to stop it with your usual double-standard attacks. Yes, I am talking about sections of the Australian media. They watched as they said the support wouldn't hold up, and with every attack our support just keeps growing. Then came the South Australian election. Our increased support in the polls was tested at an election for the first time, and we showed it was real. Then we won the Farrer by-election. For me, this was a watershed for One Nation. We had breached that final barrier. A One Nation candidate with strong credentials in David Farley won us a seat in the House of Representatives for the first time. And not just any seat, but a seat previously held by former representatives of the Liberals and the Nationals. Even after that far-left mob, Get Up, spent more than $600,000 directly attacking me and Farrer, it just drove more voters our way. Australians aren't buying this crap from the political establishment and its media supporters anymore. But now I want to turn to one very, very important social and cultural issue facing this country. I refer firstly to the transgender insurgency. The transgender ideology has penetrated almost every regulatory authority, and it is supported by the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Dr. Anna Cody, who, in government, I would sack. So too, the head of the Human Rights Commission, Hugh de Cresta. This transgender campaign, where a man can become a woman because he simply feels that way, or where major political parties have some difficulty in defining what is a woman and what is a man. It's worth pointing out that it's 15 years since Germaine Greer said in a debate about sex and gender that sex is fundamentally tied to the body and that transgender women are not female. She argued that undergoing surgery does not make a person female, or to remind viewers of her frequently quoted remark, quote, "Just because you lop off your penis and then wear a dress doesn't make you a woman," unquote. Germaine Greer led many people to summarise her position, not her words but mine, that a woman must have female anatomy and a person without a penis is not a man. Yet we have almost every instrument of government dedicated to a transgender ideology which seeks to redefine humanity. I am not opposed to transgender people. I am simply saying that a transgender woman should not be allowed into women's sport or into a woman's changing room, and likewise a transgender man. Yet we have the Human Rights Commission, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, regulatory authorities, the Office of Women, and large sections of the Labor Party, the Liberal Party, and the Greens unprepared to articulate the biological truth. The AIDS Council of New South Wales is a leading advocate for transgenderism in Australia. They go into the workplace to ensure that there is what is called a Workplace Equity Index. All health regulatory bodies sign up to this. Corporations pay the AIDS Council of New South Wales for its advice and services. The Office of the Ombudsman signs up to the Australian Workplace Equity Index. This nonsense must end. Dr. D. Cresta, the head of the Human Rights Commission, wants more power, basically to control the debate about what is a woman, and this stuff is going on in schools. This transgender ideology is infecting all of society. It is explicitly subversive. There seems to be no boundaries, as it has become part of the propaganda being imposed on kids in classrooms. Who dreamt up this title? The Australian Workplace Equity Index. I repeat, you can't find a government regulatory authority that hasn't signed up for this. This transgender movement is a militant force right throughout society and must be confronted. I repeat, through a whole stack of government authorities which the average Australian knows nothing about because they are too busy getting on with their lives, this movement, like militant Islam, is everywhere and seeks to redefine humanity and biology. And in this way, change the nation. It won't happen if I have any say in it. But don't expect the Labor Party to confront this real issue. They are in bed with it. Australia deserves a voice in all this. Only one nation will provide the strenuous opposition that is needed. This whole subversive transgender insurgency must be dismantled.
Senator, we're very coming up towards the question. Would you better just possibly go to your summary?
I've only got a few pages left. You're right. Very important. Finally, they might give the information to people. Finally, let me turn to the greatest economic and technical change since the Industrial Revolution, to this point ignored almost entirely by the Albanese government. I refer, of course, to artificial intelligence. AI bids to transform the global economy. It will affect everyone's lives, including their daily lives, their relationships, indeed, their environment. It has the potential to dramatically affect the lives of human beings, the consequences of which may be still unknown. Therefore, AI should not be left entirely to self-regulation. Public trust is essential for widespread adoption. The Albanese government's response to the coming of AI is largely to leave it in the hands of corporations with little regulation to ensure that the industry operates in the public interest. One nation seeks a middle path encouraging AI adoption and its economic benefits while imposing enforceable safeguards where AI can importantly affect people's rights, their safety, their employment, their privacy, even their democratic participation. If AI is to be successfully deployed, public trust is a prerequisite. One nation will put in place mechanisms, if not to entirely protect jobs, and we won't take the Albanese government's route of lying to you, but we will have to get everyone through this. One nation will look after the interests of working Australians whose economic well-being could be threatened. I don't claim to have the answers now, but we will find them. In general terms, all requires regulatory measures. On a final note, I have a few more words for the mainstream media. This much you want to hear. One nation's news support brings with it much greater responsibility. I get that. And I can assure you that One Nation, its administration, its candidates and its leadership will prove we can deliver. It's your job to scrutinise my party, its people and its politics. Unlike the Prime Minister, I welcome it. I'm an elected representative and I should be scrutinised. That doesn't give you the licence to pile on. It doesn't give the licence to delegitimise my party. It doesn't give you the licence to say preferencing one nation is immoral. It doesn't give you the licence to continue to repeat the lie that we are a racist party, because that is untrue. The Australian people can make up their own mind, and they are. Rest assured, there will be big changes if One Nation is given the chance. The SBS will be gone. There's no need for it anymore. The internet has overtaken the need for it. The ABC will still exist, but in a very different form. Taxpayers will still fund some of the ABC's operations in regional, rural and remote areas where there is a lack of commercial media. But in the cities, which are already saturated with media outlets across the political spectrum, the ABC will only be subscription service only. From its chairman down, the ABC has proven itself to be completely in denial about its profoundly transparent political bias and the activists and its ranks. Yet they think of themselves as a pillar of democracy. The arrogance is stunning in its scope. It is partly for this reason I have at times refused ABC interviews. I will continue to do so because, as media outlets go, the ABC is very low on my list of priorities and their bias against One Nation me is obvious. Remember this, I don't answer to the media. I answer to the Australian people. Australians' trust in media, the government and public institutions is at an all-time low. To you, the media, may I offer some advice. You have to earn the trust of the Australian people. I am confident I can. Can the media say the same thing? Many see you as part of the problem. In some respects, that's right. One Nation and its leadership have one overriding ambition: to give this country back its wealth, which has been stolen from us by bad policy and arrogant policy misfits. I love this country. I'm a patriot and an unashamed nationalist. I will always put Australia and Australians first. One Nation will do its best to change this country's direction, to reassert its values, to honour its traditions, to reinforce that we are one nation under one flag. And my party will put Australia back on the path to prosperity, security, independence and freedom. One Nation will do everything to help take this country back for its people. At the moment, government of this country has become a victim of the ideology of people who have failed you in the past and will fail you again. Thank you for the invitation to be with you today.
Thank you, Senator. Just in case it needs clarifying, we had no knowledge of what happened here. Maybe Banksy's big in Australian politics, I'm not sure. So
just tell me, is this another first?
I believe it is. I believe
Usually
it is.
I get a lot of firsts in my life.
I believe it is. So there you go. We've ticked off another one. I'm going to get straight into it. I know my colleagues are champing at the bit. You finished on the media. I might start on that. And obviously you've got massive interest in your party now. You're leading in the polls and you mentioned that scrutiny comes with that. For the next election, will you hold daily news conferences for a travelling press pack and allow all media organisations to attend?
Well, I did tell you I was banning the ABC and I've also banned The Guardian as well. As I said, I'm not going to be anyone's football to kick around when you want to. I'm here I want truthful, honest reporting from the media. You will have access to me. Yes, I will. Because the public must know that we are going to answer the questions for the public, but with truth and honesty, and that's all I expect. That's all I've ever asked.
Would there be a clean slate, though, for the start of a campaign, perhaps? Allow everyone there and see what you think?
Well, we've got about 1.5 years before the campaign. Let's see how it goes between now and then. If you want to keep bashing me around, I don't forget. I'm like a bloody old elephant. I won't forget.
A lot of questions to come. Please keep it to one. Don't respect me. Respect your colleagues instead. Michelle Grattan begins from the conversation.
Senator, there'll be a lot of questions on policy, but I'd like to try and clear up one matter first. The other day, you accused the late Tim Fischer of calling you a witch and said that he wanted you burnt at the stake, or you should be burnt at the stake.
Burnt at the stake, correct.
Made this allegation a few decades ago. It was denied by Mr Fisher at the time, and nobody has been able to find a record, including his biographer, who did a very thorough job on a couple of editions. Tim Fisher's widow is now upset about this. I wonder if you can provide evidence for your claim, or if not, would you admit that you might be mistaken?
Oh, I'm not mistaken, Michelle. I read it in the newspaper myself, and to read something like that about yourself is like, wow, whoa. So anyway, I don't deny reading it. It was back many years ago, 96, 97, I can't pick what year it was, but it was definitely written in the newspaper.
Thank you.
Mark Riley from the Seven Network.
Mark Riley, Senator from the Seven Network. You said in your speech, One Nation will look after working Australians. Just want to examine a little of your record. You criticised minimum wage increases. You opposed same job, same pay. You voted against casual workers' rights, wage theft criminalisation and workplace protections for the gig economy, and you've argued recently again for more powers for bosses to sack workers. How is any of that helping working Australians?
Well, I'd tell you, Mark, is it really working for small business out there, industries, manufacturing? And I was speaking to one business person, he said the latest increase is going to cost him $50,000 for his business, and he said, I've got to find $100,000 to pay that. He said, I'm going to have to let people go. So it is a great concern. You need to look at the other side of the ledger. Can businesses afford and pay that? I understand there is a struggle that is happening in people being able to afford and pay their bills, but there has to be a balance. As I said, I've been in small business. This government hasn't. Albanese and Chalmers haven't. You have to have a balance there by all means. Why it's increased in cost of living? Because of the electricity charges. That's the main thing, which has cost us business right across the whole board. Charges there. Industrial relations, I can assure you, needs a complete overhaul because it's not working. Businesses also tell me you can't sack people these days. They're on their phones, they don't work, they don't turn up, they actually are lazy. And businesses are tied to it. They've had enough. They want change. You talk about same pay. If you're male or female, you do get the same pay. That's all smoke and mirrors, what they're telling you. If you're an airline pilot, male, female, you get the same pay. You're hosting, same pay. You do the work, you're same pay. The difference is that if women take time off and they are not paid their wages because they're not working, fair enough. Why should business pay them if they're not at work? That's the difference. That's why the pay gap is there.
David Spears from the ABC.
Senator, thank you. Just picking up on your point about not changing over the years. One idea you have advocated over many years is for a flat tax. A couple of years ago in the Senate, you argued for a flat 25% tax rate to replace the progressive income tax system that we have. Is that still your view, or have you changed, and can you explain why?
David, we have to overhaul our tax system. We are one of the highest tax countries in the world. And when people have the money after paying their PAYE tax got in their pocket, we're paying another 10% on top of that again. There's only two ways, and this government, I don't trust them because I believe that at the next election they're elected again with the Greens, they will introduce a death duties or inheritance tax. We have to get productivity up in the country. More people working, contributing. And if we can do that, the government will not be able to reach into the hands of Australians anymore. They need rein in the spending. What I want to have a look at, and I'm not going to give you where my head's at the moment for tax policy, I intend to speak to those experts, economists or people that I trust have a good understanding of our tax system. But before the next election, I will introduce a tax system for all Australians, give them incentives like now at the moment, we want pensioners, aged pensioners, veterans, and I am looking at students to be able to work unlimited hours, and they can then be taxed on that, but it doesn't affect their pensions or the healthcare card. I want income splitting. I want people to be able to split their incomes so that those families, whether mum or dad, want to stay home. and to give them help. But there's a lot of work to do. You need to actually rein in government spending, give tax breaks here, and those people who are working overtime, they then should have, don't tax them to the hilt, let them do as much overtime as they can.
Thanks.
Phil Curry from the AFR.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, Senator.
Hello, Phil.
You didn't mention in your speech, but you have been critical in the past about foreign aid.
About foreign aid?
Foreign aid, yeah, levels
Yes.
of foreign aid. Over the past decade or so, as we've seen the sort of rise of China in the region, and governments here of both persuasions, Coalition and Labor, have increasingly relied on aid as a form of soft diplomacy, especially in the Pacific, to push back at the incursion, if you like, of China. Have you changed your views on foreign aid? Do you see a value in it from a geostrategic position, or are you still largely opposed? Are you still of the same views you held for a long time?
Phil, as long as it's spent well, when I hear, and I just heard recently from the foreign aid that's going to Papua New Guinea, and I've heard this for years and years and years, decades, the corruption that goes on there and the amount that is actually wasted. I've got Australians, as I said, 130,000 Australians living in poverty here who can't get a roof over their head. And we're giving foreign aid to countries that don't respect it, and corruption that's happening there, that needs to change. You talk about the Chinese. The amount of money that we've helped with our specific partners, and we've given them foreign aid, only still allow to the Chinese to come in there, their Belt and Road project supports that they're building, that's like they've said to us, up you, we're actually going to just, take the Chinese and have them here. There has to be give and take. If you want Australian hard-earned taxpayer dollars, well, there has to be, you work with us. And China is a real big concern to me, where we're headed with that. Foreign aid in the right places, but I also believe, clean up our own backyard first. And when I can put a roof over the people's heads, put food on the table for our Australian people, and not see the starvation that's happening with children and people, then we might be able to increase and help others.
So if a country accepts foreign aid from China, then we wouldn't give it?
Sorry?
Were you saying essentially that if a country accepts foreign aid from China, then we wouldn't give it as well? That would be a deal
My
breaker
concern
for us?
is they are still accepting from China. If China is our biggest concern, I think that we need to really look at the relationship that they have with China and how it's going to impact on us. If we've been, propping up these countries for many years, Tom, we have to realise the threat. We cannot disregard China. We have to realise the threat that it could be in our vicinity.
Katina Curtis from the West Australian.
Senator Katina from the West Australian. You said just before One Nation's candidates and its leadership will prove we can deliver. You've clearly been professionalising the party structure. I'm wondering if you can walk us through how you are going about vetting candidates and staff. Does it go beyond police checks and looking at bankruptcy records? And what are your red lines for who you'll hire or who you want to represent you?
We've stepped up the vetting process that we have at the moment. So they go through a whole vetting process, even an international vetting process, plus what's here with their Facebook pages, what they put, what they've said in the past, and are they really compatible with our policies, and do they believe in what we're wanting to achieve and do. So that's a process that we're going through. Unlike, we are... I think One Nation's scrutinised a hell of a lot more than any other political party, and the focus has always been on us. And you really need to have a look at the other political parties, the problems that they've had over the years. But don't forget that I've only been back running this party again since 2015 in the elections that we had. We didn't have the big machine behind us. So we've actually had to build that. And over that period of time, I've got the strong foundations now. We've improved our resources. We've actually got more people on board. We've now have got some time behind us of that last 10, 11 years.
Greg Brown from the Australian.
Senator Hanson, you mentioned in your speech that Australians were getting hit by high interest rates. What could we expect from a One Nation government's relationship with the Reserve Bank? If you think rates are too high, will you be pressuring the Governor and the Board to cut? And in a more general sense, would you seek for a One Nation government to have a greater influence over interest rate decisions?
You can't. The RBA is totally different to the executive of the government, right? So you shouldn't be influencing and telling them. What the government has to do is pull the heads in with their spending. I'd get rid of the Climate Change Department, the Aboriginal Department, and also those duplication of some of those with education and the health departments that are duplicated with the states. We can cut a lot of spending. NDIS needs to be cut back. But what the government is doing now, they're actually going to reduce it by 160,000 Australians. Some of those possibly really do need that help and assistance with NDIS. They're going to deny them. So what we need to do is go after the rauters, the scammers, the people that are ripping off the system to pull back the cost to the NDIS, which is about $52 billion now at the moment. They've done nothing about it. This government did nothing about it. Well, I'll give credit to Bill Shorten. He was the best minister. The previous government under Stuart Roberts and Linda Reynolds were hopeless in this area.
So you wouldn't replicate what Donald Trump has been doing in the US in putting pressure on the Fed to cut rates?
If you actually rein in your spending, interest rates are going up as connected with inflation. If you pull in government spending, stop wasting the dollars and pay down our debt, that is going to not reflect on the RBA, get prosperity up in the country. Where is our small businesses? 50,000 have closed under this government. Over 1,400 industries and manufacturing gone. Jobs are going to be gone. So the way they've run this country, they've run it into the ground. That's why the high inflation, and that's why we also have interest rates going up. And the governor, she doesn't want to put it up, but the writing's on the wall that they can't keep it down.
One of the government waste initiatives is withdrawing from the UN. I think it's a few $100 million. The commentary on that is that, well, every recognised country in the world's part of it, no one's ever withdrawn, but we could lose shipping rights, aviation links, passports wouldn't work at swipe gates, visas might take weeks or months. Do you think Australians want that to happen, to save a few $100 million?
The average Australian out there, yes, they do. Look, Tom, what it is with the UN, we saw the control that I feel that we've lost control over our country. You know, you can work with other countries by all means, but I believe in our own sovereignty. I believe in our own governments. And I don't believe that we should be dictated to the UN or other countries. If you don't do this, we're going to put restrictions on you and we're going to tell you what to do. I went to the European Union and I spoke to them over there, and we were asking about, you're going to give us a free trade deal for Australia. And you know what they turned and they said to me, and I asked the question, they said, not until you actually comply with climate change policies. So it's basically, you will do what we say. That's not the country that I want, Tom. You work with other countries and you try and do right. But my duty is to the Australian people.
So are you looking to, for example, renegotiate shipping lane rights with every country in the world? And
no, I'm not talking about that.
Rights.
Tom, I'm not
but that's
getting
part
into
of being...
Tom, I'm not getting into that now with that, about shipping rights and all the rest of it. So what I say, we need to look at where we are with the United Nations. And I'm telling you, I'm a person that wants to govern our own country, go down the path that we want to, and I've seen that we've been dictated to on too many occasions, and people want their sovereignty back.
I wasn't saying you want to do that, but that could be a consequence of pulling out from the UN.
But Tom, you know, let's see what happens at the time. Where it's at least 2 years down the track.
Okay. James Massola from the SMH and the Age.
Thanks for your speech, Senator, and also for your appearance here today. Hope we see you back here soon. A simple question for you. Reflecting on your speech, your comments about migration and multiculturalism and what have you, is Australia in danger of being swamped by Muslim migration?
Not if I got any say in it. Won't be.
You think that's happening now, though, Senator? Is that part of your concern, that we are headed
As
down
I said, it's radical Islam. That is my grave concern. And we've seen over the period of time, I think we've got 18,000 people on Asia watch list at the moment, and probably 220 very serious. In a country like this, what about, you know, what happened in Bondi, which I have expressed? We can't keep up with the personnel to keep an eye on these people. I'm not apologising for anything. And I've seen too much footage on our TVs from what's happening in Britain, Canada, France, Germany. They're all just absolutely, I won't say it,
So that's something you're guarding against?
assholes. Yes, and I don't want Australia to become like that.
Sarah Martin from The Guardian.
Senator Hanson, Sarah Martin from The Guardian. Taxpayers are paying more than $150,000 a year for your daughter, Lee Hanson, to seemingly campaign full-time in Tasmania while employed as a political advisor for a New South Wales senator. Did you have any role in appointing her to that position?
Honestly, you never give up. I've never seen a person that's such a trashy journalist, you know, and what you put out all the time, you've got this obsession with constantly trying to pull down myself, my party, or Mrs. Reinhardt. Whatever you do, you will be banned from my answering. I'll answer you this question today, but I'm telling you now, don't come near me for an interview in the future, because of 25 of your articles, it's always 28 articles, is constantly bashing One Nation. You don't research properly, you don't know your information, and you will put out lies about me. Well, I've had enough of that. But I'll tell you that, no, I didn't get her that job. She got the job on her own merits, by someone who actually wanted to employ her, her abilities, her skills in HR, her abilities in working for the Tas University for 8 years, and was head of a department down there. So my daughter is very capable of doing it. And if you're very concerned that she might end up in the Senate with me, if I'm fortunate enough to get elected by the people of Queensland, you're going to have a lot to write about then, aren't you?
So you had no role in So to clarify, you had no role in appointing her to that position, none whatsoever?
I've given you my answer.
Thank you.
You have had a lot of criticism of the major parties for the, you say, you know, poor standards that everyday Australians wouldn't accept. Do you get the optics of someone working in Tasmania while they're working for someone based in New South Wales?
Tom, there's a lot of people, and I remember that even Simon Birmingham had his staffer working in Tasmania.
But
He's senior advisor. So it's not unusual for other members of parliament to have their staffers live elsewhere. You know, we could actually run the country through Zoom during COVID. We had our meetings on our computers. What is the problem now? Is it because it's One Nation? Do you have a problem because it's my daughter? You know, you really, need to go and have a look around instead of criticising me. And as long as the job's done, and I can assure you, Tom, I don't believe in nepotism. Either you can do the job or you can't do the job. If you can't do it, you won't be around me.
next question, John Paul Yankee from NTV.
Senator, thanks for your talk today. I want to talk about your Indigenous Affairs portfolio. You mentioned one of the aspects of that there. You called it the Aborigines Department. It's the National Indigenous Australians Agency. You want to abolish that. It was set up by the coalition government. You want to abolish it. You've identified that will save $4.5 billion in the programs and the grants that it provides. What are you envisaging happens to that money? Does it go back to mainstream departments? Because those programs fund things like housing, essential infrastructure, water security, jobs, range of programs, cost of living measures, family and children's safety centres. What happens to those services if that money is taken out of that grant program? What happens to those Australians who live in remote communities?
Look, I agree about your concern, but my vision for Australia is that we're all Australians, regardless of race, colour, creed, where you are. We're all treated as Australians equally on an individual needs basis, not based on race. And with that, yes, that money will go into consolidated revenue, where any Australian can get that help if they need help. And all this money that we've paid out, probably about $30 billion plus a year, where's it gone? Where's the accountability? Where has the gap been closed? Where is the education for these young Aboriginals? Their health issues, their education, all this type of thing. And you can't tell me that in the classroom, because you're Aboriginal, you actually have, you can have extra teaching in education, and you have your
support
tools, everything paid for. And the child beside them isn't Aboriginal, but they're in poverty as well. That's what I want to cut out.
You mentioned $30 billion there. Can I ask you where you get that figure from?
From state and federal, it's been advocated for many, many times through media outlets, that money that's spent. This is all the other programs that goes there. Even Aboriginal corporations are treated totally different to any other Australian corporation under ADSIC. The inequality, the differences have to change. If we want to be united as a nation and see ourselves as Australians, we have to stop this. That's where you will move forward and give benefits and hope to our children coming through.
Thank you, Senator.
Next question, Michael De Percy from The Spectator.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Senator Hanson, for your address. There are no hypotheticals about One Nation possibly being in government anymore. These are facts, and I wanted to ask you about the Australian Public Service, and particularly its major role in policy. In recent times, the APS has become increasingly politicised, or at least critiqued in that way. How do you see a One Nation government, let me say that again, a One Nation government, managing its relationship with the public service?
Look, it is still hypothetical, if we're going to get there. And I've got to prove myself to the Australian people that we can actually do it. And I acknowledge that. And I'm not going to say, yes, we're going to be government. There's a lot of work to be done. The public service has been, I think, poorly run for a long, long time. And we've got bureaucrats in there who have the attitude, oh, well, we're here for the long term, you just come and go. We're actually going to do what we want to do. I also blame the government, I blame the ministers who hold these portfolios, because I deal with them. I've spoken to them on the floor of Parliament and I listen to their comments. They are incompetent and they are useless. They don't know what they're doing, they don't know how to run their portfolios, and they rely on the departments and the bureaucrats to give them the information. I want to run a government that the ministers, will be across their briefs. They will know what they're talking about. They will tell the bureaucrats what's going to happen. Under One Nation, we will go in there and say, right, we'll get legislation passed, this is what we want to do. We'll go to the departments and heads and say, this is it, this is how you run it, not the other way around.
Thank you.
Dana Daniel from the Canberra Times.
Thank you, Senator, for your speech. Dana Daniel from the Canberra Times. You launched a Canberra branch of One Nation in November, but I don't believe it's held a meeting. No members have been allowed to speak to media. I'm wondering whether you have an active supporter base in the ACT. And Canberra cops a lot of criticism from Conservatives. You've spent a lot of time here in your career. How do you rate our nation's capital?
I try to keep out of it as much as I possibly can.
Do you have...
Although I love my job, I'm here for Parliament.
Is that what you're telling local members?
Sorry. No, we have started a branch here, and what I heard, the first meeting they had over 200 people there, so it's going extremely well in Canberra. Mark is the coordinator for it, and he has asked me to come. Mark, I'll come one day when I can. But yes, no, we've got strong support in Canberra. Go to the Kingo. I tell you, I just get so many people come up to me wanting to have photos and talk to me, and they're really pleased to see me. So there is support in Canberra. Thanks.
You've got free speech on your policy, the website there, that you'll push for constitutional protection of free speech and work to repeal any laws that restrict it. So speaking of the local branches, if you had those free speech laws, would they allow One Nation to have any restrictions on media silence, social media bans or gag orders on people within branches?
Tom, so you're saying now, because I want free speech and I'd like to see it enshrined in our constitution to have free speech, by all means. So now you're saying, am I going to stop my branches from having free speech?
No, I'm asking, would your free speech laws still allow One Nation as a party to have gag orders on branch members?
When we've started up, and I only started up the branches last August, I wouldn't have branches prior to that because we had 350 branches the first time around I formed One Nation. I had nothing but trouble putting up bushfires, people who thought they were in these executive positions and thought they were running the party. So that's why this time around I said no branches. I changed that after the last election. We're allowing branches to go ahead. We've had a lot of enthusiastic people that have come on board to join One Nation. We've restricted these people until we know who they are. Are they right people in these positions? Because I know the majority of you are going to go out there and try and hound me or criticise me for anyone who's associated with this party or is a member. You've already done it. I know what you're up to. And that's why I have to be in total control of it. And I'm not going to allow you to drag me down through some member of a branch.
Cam Redden from Sky News is next.
Tom, thank you. Senator Hanson, thank you for your address. We've heard a bit about your plans for the public broadcasters today. You say SBS will be gone, the ABC moving to a subscription model. That would give you an annual budget in the realm of $1 to $1.5 billion. So how would you spend that money?
Oh, golly, where do I start? There's a hell of a lot to be done. If you look at, my speech focused on the homeless, the people out there that are living in poverty. We have to bring down prices, we really do. It's to ensure those people look after these centres like the Salvos and the other ones, Red Shield and these ones, to be able to provide for families out there that are really struggling and doing it tough. Ensure that kids going to school have a pair of shoes, have a uniform. It's just trying to help out the cost of living till we can pull back on the budget and, have more money there. These are things to cut back the budget.
So you'd link those to funding from the ABC going into homelessness support?
That's one area that I would like to help Australians, that we can. We've got $1 trillion debt. I've also got to look at pulling down that debt. We're spending about $50 billion a year. Can you imagine where we can spend that $50 billion a year in hospitals and schools? I've even got people out, wanting beds in hospitals around the country. We can't even get doctors out there. I've got a program that I'm looking at the moment that we can get 600 extra weeks out of doctors for over a 4-year program of $10.4 million. Part of the money will go to that, to get doctors in rural and regional areas. There is so much to do. The problems that are constantly faced every day from Australians. Where is the money going to go? Well, I'll sort that out with my team, the members of parliament that I have around me. They will come to me with where money needs to be is a priority, not to buy votes out there, but a priority to help the Australian people.
Thank you.
Charles Croucher from the Nine Network.
Hi, Senator. Charles Crouch from Nine, and I too like to travel cattle class. You mentioned your support for nuclear power. Currently on the website it says the One Nation's policy is for one large-scale reactor to be advocated for on the East Coast somewhere. Will that be enough, or do you expect there needs to be more than one nuclear reactor? And is One Nation advocacy enough, or do you expect the government to have to tip in some money for nuclear power?
Yeah. Charles, at the moment, the big mistake that the coalition made at the last election to say they were going to put in, 7 reactors. And of course it blew out, and of course the climate change, the energy group and Simon Holmes, the court led by him, $600 billion. Well, it's not going to cost that. Renewable energy by all means. No more wind turbines to be put in. That will be scrapped. No more solar panels on agricultural land. Gone. Put it up on your roofs, I don't care. Coal-fired power stations, yes, we need to have that. One in South Australia, one in Queensland, to deliver the power that we need. And then from there we move forward and put in a reactor. To start with one, it all comes down to if you can afford it as well as a nation. And I'd like the reactor to go on the East Coast. Build one and deliver the power. The more we can get power out to the people, we will increase industries, manufacturing, and relieve the energy cost on people.
And that's the government would build that would be publicly funded?
If we can get private investment in it, we will look at that. But I'm not making that decision now. This is all on the table.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anna Henderson from SBS.
Thank you. Anna Henderson from SBS. Thanks for taking our questions. Your party platform commits to roll back abortion rights in Australia. So can you give us a sense of what you think should be the gestational limit for abortion?
It's a discussion that needs to be held with the Australian people, but I can tell you, to abort a baby the day before birth is abhorrent and disgusting. And that's what I oppose, and that's what many, common sense Australians believe. So I'm not against, people in circumstances, women that need to have an abortion for medical reasons, for some circumstance. I'd rather educate women to use contraceptives than to go through an abortion. Too many abortions in this country anyway.
In the US, many states do ban it from 4 weeks. Are you in...
I'm not advocating the time at this stage, but I can tell you, even from 20 weeks, I think it's too late to have an abortion. But definitely, 39 weeks to have an abortion, that is clearly not humane.
And Senator, you have said you want to abolish SBS. You said in your speech the internet has taken over the need for it. But SBS is providing Australian news in 60 languages, not international news alone.
We've got 7,
so isn't 9, that in line?
2 will be
but
gone,
in language, in up to 60
and then
languages.
Then you've also got, the other forms of internet as well. Sky's great to go and look for news. So
I'm talking about in 60 languages to help people integrate into Australia.
I'm sorry.
Is that not
look,
part
I
of
can
your
understand your
platform?
question. You're going to be without a job. So anyway, I can understand that.
Isn't that part of your platform? Isn't it part of your platform, Senator, to integrate people from other countries into Australia, to help them become Australian?
No, I want them to be able to learn to speak English before they get here, to get their citizenship, and that will help them assimilate into our society. Because 872,000 people said they speak very little English or none at all. So where's the assimilation? We are a monocultural nation, not a multicultural, and our language is English, and that will help people actually be able to go out there and get a job.
Thank you.
Just wanted to clarify on the very late-term abortions. Would there be an exemption if the mother's life is in danger?
Oh, of course,
Right.
of course, most definitely.
Chloe Burris from the Network 10.
Thank you, Senator. The Prime Minister is today announcing a pay rise for childcare workers. We know that he wants to move to a universal childcare system. The Coalition's looking at more flexible options like subsidies for nannies. What would you do to improve the childcare system?
Childcare is completely out of control. You're looking at 16 billion a year. They're asking that if this goes into more childcare workers, which is about 2,500 workers in the childcare industry, or owners of childcare, I should say, that own childcare. You know what? When I see that sort of money being put into childcare, I think we need to have a complete investigation into it, where the money's going. It just sounds astounding to me that $16 billion have been put into childcare. So I'd like to have an investigation into it. And, some of these people, you've got mums and dads, and I was a mother of 4 children. I didn't have a university degree to look after my children. Why do we now expect these childcare centres to have, students or people with some sort of degree to look after a child? It's just got out of proportion. It's just ridiculous. And as far as, yes, we need to look at other ways to help those mums and dads to be able to afford to get a childcare. And if the money goes with the child, with the parent, maybe that would help, rather than these childcare centres, which families are struggling to get their children into.
So ideally, what do you think the childcare system should look like then?
I'm not going to be policy on the run. It needs a full investigation into it. Where is the money going? Who's utilising those services? Do they require those services? Because it's costing the taxpayer, like I said, $16 billion.
And you think the pay rises are unnecessary?
I can't say whether didn't they get a pay rise just not so long ago? Like I said, pay rise. Who pays for it? The taxpayer again.
Nathan Schmidt from NCA Newswire.
Speech, Senator. You've spoken in the past about the need for Australia to have fuel sovereignty and self-sufficiency. The reality is any hope of that is quite some way away still. You've reiterated this morning your position on Muslim migration. How would you explain your position to countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia, which we have lent on quite heavily over the past few months for fuel and for fertiliser as well, and might need to do again in the future?
So just clarify, it was still a bit hard for me to hear. So you're saying we're relying on Indonesia and Singapore. Well, the fuel comes through Singapore. On what? Fuel and fertiliser?
Well, we've relied on our Muslim majority neighbours in recent months for fertiliser from Indonesia.
Isn't it a shame? Isn't it a shame? We've had, 7, 8 oil refineries in this country with less population than what we have now, and yet we've allowed it dissipate, and governments have got rid of it.
But it'd be some time before that position could be rectified.
Correct. So you still do what you need to do to get the supply into this nation. Why haven't we got our own fertiliser? Why aren't we down there? There was a fellow in Victoria. He went to the state government there and he wanted to set up a fertiliser plant. He went through it for a couple of years with them, and guess what? It never happened. He then had to go over to New Zealand after trying to deal with them for 2 years to have this industry set up. And that's the problem that we're having now. If anyone wants to set up industry or manufacturing in this country, it takes them years to get approval for it. That has to stop. We can't keep doing this to our industries. We've lost so much in this country. There's no investment in Australia anymore. People don't see this as a future here at all. We've got problems now with Japan and South Korea who are actually saying, you know, about is there predictability in Australia to do business here? We rely on a lot of that investment in Australia to give us the dollars to run this country. Poor management has got us in this situation. When it comes to the refineries, when it comes to actually oil, and I'm saying dig, baby, dig. We need to utilise our resources here in this nation to build the wealth again that we can deliver the services to this generation or future generations.
We're very short. Sorry, Nathan, final question from Jason Koutsoukis, who's going to quickly find his way through these stacked tables here.
Senator, your former party leader in South Australia, Jennifer Game, won a summary judgment against you in the Adelaide Magistrates Court last week for $15,000. Why did she have to sue you to recover what she says were ordinary campaign expenses?
She was a former party leader, right? Let me just tell you the facts. She put in a claim of $30,000, which wasn't acceptable and didn't meet the criteria of the party, like many other candidates put it in. So because she wasn't happy with it, that went through court. So she only got $15,000 out of it. She was asking for 30, but she only got 15.
You talk a lot about the big two parties. There's an easy way to be more transparent than them. You could commit to telling us, the voters, I'm not just the journalists, the voters, how your campaign will be paid for before it happens, so release your donations if you like. Would you do that and show everyone that you're more transparent than the major parties?
So you want me to act differently to the major political parties?
I've just said it's clearly they don't do it. They don't do it. This is a higher level. I'm just asking you could show them, hey, I'm more transparent than you.
Hold on a minute. Didn't we have Fire the Liar last week? We actually got donations from the Australian people. Now, I got an audit done and I put it up there for the people to see, didn't I? Where's Albanese's? Where's his fund? Where was he up front and showing the people what money was donated to his $27 fund and where that money came from?
Right. Need to know? Senator, we've gone well over time. I sort of took your lead on that. I'm going to ask for forgiveness rather than permission, but we appreciate your generous with your time today. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Senator Pauline Hanson.